On February 9, 1864, during the American Civil War, more than 100 Union officers escaped from Libby Prison in Richmond, Virginia. Libby Prison was one of the most feared Confederate prisons. It was overcrowded, dirty, and heavily guarded. To the prisoners inside, escape seemed almost impossible. The building sat in enemy territory, surrounded by Confederate control, and anyone who escaped still had to survive the dangerous journey back to Union lines. But one prisoner, Colonel Thomas E. Rose, believed there was a way out. The plan began in a dark basement area under the prison. Prisoners called it Rat Hell because it was damp, filthy, and filled with rodents. Guards avoided that part of the building, which made it dangerous for prisoners but useful for escape planning. Night after night, the men worked quietly. They dug through the darkness, trying to create a passage under the prison wall. The tunnel was narrow, dirty, and exhausting. Every sound could expose them. Every loose patch of earth could collapse. And every morning, they had to act normal so the guards would not suspect anything. After weeks of effort, the tunnel finally reached outside the prison area, ending near a vacant lot. Then came the escape. One by one, prisoners crawled through the passage. In total, 109 men got out. For a prison that was believed to be secure, the number was shocking. But escaping the building was only the first part. Richmond was still Confederate territory. The men had to move through dangerous land, avoid patrols, cross rivers, and find their way to Union forces. Not all of them made it. Around 59 reached Union lines. Many others were recaptured, and some died while trying to escape. Still, the Libby prison escape became one of the most famous prison breaks of the Civil War. It showed that even in a building full of guards, prisoners could turn the one place nobody wanted to enter into the beginning of freedom. The prison had walls, but the tunnel went beneath them. On the night of March 24, 1944, Allied prisoners of war began one of the most famous escape attempts in history. The place was Stalag Luft 3, a German prisoner of war camp during World War II. The camp was designed to be difficult to escape from. It had fences, watchtowers, guards, and sandy soil that was supposed to make tunneling difficult. But the prisoners inside were not ordinary prisoners. Many were trained airmen. They were disciplined, educated, and determined to keep resisting. Their escape plan was massive. Hundreds of prisoners helped prepare it in secret. They worked on 3 tunnels, codenamed Tom, Dick, and Harry. The final escape used the tunnel called Harry. The work was dangerous from the beginning. The tunnel had to stay hidden. Dirt had to be concealed. Air had to reach the men underground. The tunnel also had to stretch beyond the camp's fences, far enough that escapees could emerge outside the guarded zone. Every part of the plan required coordination. Some prisoners forged documents. Some created civilian clothes. Some studied routes. Some worked underground. Some watched the guards. The goal was not only to free a few men. The plan was to send many prisoners into occupied Europe and force Germany to spend time and resources searching for them. But when the escape night arrived, things went wrong. The tunnel exit did not come out as far into the forest as planned. This meant the men had to crawl out closer to danger than expected. The process was slow, and only 76 prisoners escaped before the tunnel was discovered. Most were soon captured. Only 3 reached safety. Then came the most tragic part. 50 of the recaptured escapees were executed on Hitler's orders, a shocking violation of the laws of war. The Great Escape became legendary not because it ended in full success, but because of the scale, planning, and courage behind it. Hundreds of men worked together under constant danger, knowing that discovery could mean severe punishment or death. The tunnel did not bring freedom to most of them, but it became a symbol of resistance, proof that even behind barbed wire, the will to escape could go underground. On the night of March 10, 1945, a secret tunnel under Island Farm Camp 198 in Bridgend, Wales, became the route for one of Britain's largest prisoner of war escapes. Island Farm was holding German prisoners of war near the end of World War II. By 1945, Germany was losing the war, but many prisoners still wanted to escape. Inside the camp, a group of prisoners had been preparing quietly. Their plan was simple in idea, but incredibly risky in reality. dig a tunnel out of the camp without guards noticing. The tunnel had to remain hidden for a long time. If guards discovered it early, the escape would end before it began. So the prisoners worked carefully, keeping their movements quiet and trying to avoid suspicion. Then, on the night of March 10th, the escape began. One after another, prisoners entered the tunnel and crawled toward the outside. By the time the guards realized what had happened, around 70 prisoners had fled into the countryside around Bridgend. The escape created panic. Wales was not a battlefield, but suddenly dozens of German POWs were loose in the area. Police, soldiers, and local authorities began searching roads, fields, villages, and railway routes. The escapees tried to move quietly, hoping to avoid capture long enough to reach safety. But Britain was an island at war, and escape was extremely difficult. Within a week, all of the escaped prisoners were recaptured. Even though the escape did not lead to permanent freedom, it still exposed a major weakness. A prisoner of war camp that seemed secure had been beaten from below, not by weapons, but by patience and secrecy. The tunnel escape also raised a serious question for authorities. If one tunnel had been built without detection, could there be more? Because of that fear, Island Farm's security situation changed after the escape. The Island Farm breakout remains remembered not because the prisoners stayed free, but because of the scale. Around 70 men leaving a British POW camp through a hidden tunnel was enough to prove that even near the end of a war, prisoners were still watching, waiting, and looking for the smallest weakness in the ground beneath them. On July 11, 2015, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman escaped from Mexico's Altiplano maximum security prison. At the time, El Chapo was one of the world's most notorious drug lords. He had already escaped prison once before in 2001. After being recaptured in 2014, he was placed in one of Mexico's most secure facilities. But even that was not enough. On the night of July 11, security cameras last saw him near the shower area of his cell. That part of the cell had a privacy blind spot. When guards later checked, he was gone. Under the shower area was the entrance to a tunnel. The tunnel stretched from the prison to a construction site outside the facility. It was long, deep, and carefully prepared. Reports described it as having lighting, ventilation, and even a rail system. This was not a desperate hole dug by one prisoner. It looked like a professional underground operation. The escape humiliated Mexico's government and triggered a massive manhunt. Officials questioned prison employees, investigated possible corruption, and faced international embarrassment. How could one of the most watched prisoners in the country disappear from a maximum security cell? The answer was underground. El Chapo was eventually recaptured in January 2016 and later extradited to the United States. But his 2015 tunnel escape became one of the most infamous prison breaks of the modern era. It showed that modern security cameras, concrete walls, and armed guards could still fail if corruption, money, and underground engineering came together. Most prison tunnels are built from the inside out. This one came from the outside in, and that made it even more frightening. On April 25, 2011, around 475 prisoners escaped from Sarposa prison in Kandahar, Afghanistan. This was not a small breakout. It was one of the largest modern tunnel escapes ever reported. Sarposa prison held many Taliban prisoners and other inmates. The prison had already suffered a major attack in 2008 when a truck bomb helped free hundreds of prisoners. After that, security was supposed to be stronger. But in 2011, the weakness came from underground. A tunnel had been dug from outside the prison toward the inside. Reports described it as hundreds of meters long, with enough preparation to move large numbers of prisoners through it over several hours. The escape happened during the night. Prisoners moved through the tunnel quietly and came out beyond the prison's control. By the time officials realized what had happened, hundreds were already gone. The scale of the escape embarrassed Afghan authorities and raised immediate questions about security failure, possible inside help, and how such a large tunnel could be built without being stopped. Some prisoners were recaptured in the days after the escape, but many remained free. What made the Sarposa escape so shocking was not only the number of prisoners, it was the planning. A tunnel of that size required time, secrecy, and coordination. It suggested that the prison had been watched and studied carefully. For security forces, the lesson was brutal. A prison wall only protects what it can see. If attackers can work underground for months, the wall becomes only the final obstacle, not the first. The Sarposa escape proved that in modern prisons, old tunnel tactics had not disappeared. They had evolved. And in one night, hundreds of prisoners vanished through a route the guards never saw. On September 6, 1971, more than 100 prisoners escaped from Punta Carretas prison in Montevideo, Uruguay. The escape became known as El Abuso. Punta Carretas was holding members of the Tupamaros, a left-wing urban guerrilla group, along with other prisoners. At the time, Uruguay was facing rising political tension and repression. Many of the prisoners saw escape not only as survival, but as part of their political struggle. The plan was enormous. For months, prisoners prepared a hidden underground route. The tunnel led out of the prison and into a nearby house. On the outside, supporters were ready to help the escapees disappear into the city. On the night of the escape, prisoners began moving quietly through the hidden route. One after another, they crawled out beneath the prison and emerged into the house. From there, they changed clothes and were moved away before the guards fully understood what had happened. In total, 111 men escaped that night. Among them was José Pepe Mujica, who decades later would become president of Uruguay. The size of the escape shocked the government. This was not one or two men slipping through a hole. This was a mass breakout, carefully planned across prison walls and city streets. For the guards, the discovery was humiliating. The prison had not simply been breached, it had been undermined for months. The Punta Carretas escape remains one of the largest tunnel prison breaks in history. It showed how a tunnel could become more than an escape route. It could become a political symbol. In one night, a prison that was supposed to hold the government's enemies lost more than 100 men through the ground beneath it. The walls still stood. The cells were still there. But the prisoners were gone. On June 11, 1962, 3 men escaped from Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary in San Francisco Bay. Their names were Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. Alcatraz was known as one of the most secure prisons in America. It sat on an island surrounded by cold water, strong currents, and distance from the mainland. Even if someone got out of the cell house, they still had to survive the bay. That is what made the escape feel impossible. For months, Morris and the Anglin brothers prepared. They worked behind their cells, using hidden spaces and ventilation routes to create a path out of the main prison building. They also made dummy heads to place in their beds so guards would think they were asleep during night checks. On the night of the escape, another inmate, Alan West, was supposed to leave with them, but he could not get out in time and was left behind. Morris and the Anglin brothers moved into the utility corridor behind the cells, climbed through a ventilator area, reached the roof, then made their way down from the cell house. From there, they crossed fences and reached the northeast shore of the island. Their final plan depended on a homemade raft. They launched into the dark water and disappeared. The next morning, guards discovered the dummy heads in the beds and realized the men were gone. The FBI investigated the escape for years. Bits of evidence were found, but the main question was never fully answered. Did they survive? Officially, authorities believed they likely drowned. But no bodies were ever found, and the mystery kept growing. Over the years, rumors, alleged sightings, and family claims kept the story alive. The Alcatraz escape was not a traditional dirt tunnel like Libby or Stalag Left 3, but it was a hidden passage escape through vents, service corridors, and blind spots inside one of the most famous prisons on Earth. Alcatraz was supposed to be escape-proof. Morris and the Anglins proved it was not.